Jesus, mate.
Welcome to Mere Mortal, episode 25, Coronavirus
How you feeling?
Pandemic. I'm feeling pretty good.
Okay. Oh, jeez.
Very good, very good.
So what's today all about?
So, felt like we should do a topical episode for once. Most of the time we've been semi-topical, I guess social media episode, whatever that was.
Yep.
Was semi-topical, but this time the coronavirus, I made a joke 1 or 2 weeks ago that it was going away. It has obviously not gone away because we are talking more about it. And it just keeps going up more and more in the news. So it was like, why not? Let's talk about it. I want some extra views on the channel.
Let's do it.
And so let's get into
It's
it.
episode 25. It's a quarter of a century.
Yes.
As it gets there, so it's a very good. I like to shout out if you're not looking or watching it through the tube or whatever else. We have got our beautiful Mere Mortal shirts, polos.
Exactly.
I actually told someone about that we were getting some polos and they just like spat on my face. They were like, why are you getting polos? That is such an old school thing to do. To that individual who I know listens to the podcast.
Did you stomp on them?
Yeah, I will see you in a year's time and I'll let you know how I'm going with this particular polo.
Good.
In any case, so today's episode 25 is coronavirus pandemic with a question mark, and that's the question that we're going to be talking about today.
Exactly. Before
Before we get into it though, as always, Mere Mortal moment of the week. Current down.
The classic. For me, mine was effort brings rewards and momentum reinforces effort. So how this occurred for me this week, I started my 8th year of gym and exercise in general.
Yep.
I had exercise before that, playing soccer, but this was, I suppose, the exercise that was really kicking me off into self-improvement and getting strong.
Yep.
And this, towards the end of the last year, I was like taking a little bit easy. I'd done most of the really hard yard during the start of the year. And so I was like, okay, start of a new 8th number year.
Yep.
I want to get into it more. And I've noticed right now, like hitting every single day, bam, 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 it makes it so much easier. Like there's no wondering, oh, where can I fit this into the day? It's like, all right, get into it. And the effort that I'm already seeing from that is bringing rewards.
Brilliant.
So momentum reinforces the effort and the effort reinforces rewards.
Wow. I like that saying. Now, I'll probably steal exactly that because what I want to talk about for the Mere Mortal moment was all I did was I looked back on some goals that I set for myself from a yearly perspective and from some of the months. Now I look back at the very first time that we set up that almost killed the fly, almost so close.
Even more.
I'm not getting more pandemics.
Dude, it's a mosquito actually.
It's
so
coming for us. If we die through the podcast, you'll know why.
If the coronavirus doesn't get us, the malaria will.
Swine flu, wherever's got that. But no, honestly, I looked back at my first month of tracking goals, and I could not believe what I now consider monthly goals in comparison to then. Looking back at what, and we track at about an 80% accomplishment. I would have accomplished 100% of some of those goals in the first week or 2 weeks. As to now, there's quite an extension. So, and we talked about this where you look at goals that you do on a month-to-month basis or even yearly, and you don't really change the ratio of how much you accomplish to what you don't accomplish. So for us, we run at almost like an 80% is like a good rate of accomplishing goals.
Yeah.
But the level of those goals is so much higher than what it was previously that even when we're talking about Mere Mortals in itself, media, I look back at last month and it was, get 100 followers in a month. And that was actually quite tough. We're now getting 60 followers in 8 days, and I kind of really half-assed in trying it, and it just sort of came through. So, it's interesting to see, the improvement and how it moved forward. So I think it reinforces the idea behind that. So it's a good take. Excellent. Now, let's talk into it. Let's get into this particular topic of the coronavirus and pandemic in general, really. Have you looked up any definitions? Because there's quite a few of these.
I did I've started really enjoying doing the etymology of the words.
Yeah, I've been liking it too.
Sort of brings a different clarity to what I use, and especially when you see people using words in the wrong way. So one thing that I really hate from Gary Vee is when he's pontificating. He's talking about, I was pontificating. And if you look up the word pontificate, it means to think in like an egregious, arrogant, pompous manner. So I was like, well, that's definitely not what he wants to talk about. And I've mentioned this before.
You have indeed. Not a hit on Gary Vee in general, but I think it's just a hit on the general use of some words that might not be their actual...
concept creep or whatever it is. So anyway, pan from I think all of this comes from ancient Greek. Pan sort of means all, every, and whole. Demos, which is the demic part of the word, means of the people, and in particular, sort of the common people. So if you add those together, it's like an all or every part applying to the person or people in general. And so that's where it's pandemic. It's like, okay, that's something that's affecting everyone. Interesting to know that epi, so when you're talking about an epidemic, is on, upon, or among. So it's not including everyone. So that's why I guess if you're looking up, if you're wondering what's the difference between an epidemic and a pandemic, an epidemic is, I guess, a lower scale. So that might be a whole country getting infected versus the whole world getting infected.
Correct, yes.
How about you? Do you get a definition of the coronavirus?
Well, I went down two paths. I went both the path I think you went down with the whole epidemic and pandemic thought, but also the actual coronavirus itself and a couple of things. Cool. And obviously, we're not experts, we're not doctors.
No.
As we've talked about, we are mere mortals, and we are talking about a particular thing that's happening in the current world, and we've researched particular pieces that we can talk about. So whatever we're saying here today, don't take it as soulful items for you to be able to be coronavirus free. So this is not what we're doing today. We're just talking about it. But like you said, epidemic is essentially, if you think about it, it's a local cell. So it's still, and I couldn't really find numbers. Like it wasn't, 50% of people are affected or 30% of people. Like didn't really find that. But it's epidemic. It's a disease that affects a greater number of people than usual in the locality that it spreads. Where the pandemic is essentially an epidemic in worldwide proportions. So the coronavirus is not actually yet considered a pandemic. It is considered to an extent an epidemic in the US, and that would have to, not in the US, in China. That would have to recreate across all the different places that's currently affecting across the world to really be called a pandemic. But there wasn't a clear understanding of what pandemic or epidemic is, or when that ratio is. So it was interesting. But the other one that I didn't sort of wanted to talk about was the actual definition. So I'm not sure if you are aware of it. So coronavirus or COV, essentially just a large family of viruses, right? And a coronavirus is just the flu. So it's just different strands of what it means. So the actual why this coronavirus, and scientifically the zoonotic, meaning that it's transmitted between animals and people. I guess the reason that it's a little bit different, people are getting a little bit scared about it, is that it's not a virus that's been seen before, in humans.
Do you know why it's got the moniker Corona? Well, I know in Spanish, Corona means like the crown. So does it have like a similar? Where's the root coming from of that?
Well, going through the actual what the corona virus in itself means, I'm quickly going through. Not that I really have where it sort of come from, because it's called sort of COVID-19 D, right? Which is just the different strain of it. That corona piece, don't know. In essence, not sure, but they're all viruses, right?
Either a very good marketing ploy by the beer Corona.
Unfortunately not, because all of their share market is essentially like plunged and people are not buying Corona, which is kind of dumb.
Hilarious.
But in essence, look, just in generally, right, large family viruses, they cause illnesses from, the common cold all the way to like really severe stuff. So let's talk about previous things that have happened. SARS and MERS. I don't know if you remember MERS as well.
I didn't remember that when I started researching this. I saw it, but I definitely remember the SARS virus, even though I was still young and didn't understand it.
So the SARS virus, and I don't know if I also have the details and the numbers for it. Essentially, SARS virus affected around 200,000 people or more. It was killing at a ratio of about 10%, so which is important to note. MERS, which is the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome and coronavirus, that one was killing 35% of people that it affected.
Okay, wow.
It was specifically from camels in the Middle East, so it was quite often when you got that, you were going to die. But it didn't spread too widely. That was heavily contained. In the case of SARS, and I guess this is talking about the coronavirus and the pandemic and why people might have a reason to be scared about it. With SARS, it was a new strain, but the way that it was, I guess, interacted with individuals and how, the global, population responded to it, they were able to, sustain it back from really spreading quite widely. And after a particular season, they were able to essentially eradicate it. So you won't really see SARS again. I think MERS is not the case. That still exists, but it's restrained to a very local population.
Yeah.
Now, coronavirus, I think what people are getting a little bit like, not sure what's going to happen here, is it's only killing at the moment 3% of individuals that have been affected to it.
Yeah.
But it is, in general terms, spreading a lot faster through what they call sort of community spread. And that means that it can go a long time in communities and spread out before you actually start noticing it, which means it's a lot harder for it to actually be contained. So some numbers, and I think we were talking about this earlier, when I wrote my notes for this, coronavirus has spread to about 95,000 people. As of looking at it today, it's 105,000 people, and over 3,500 people have died from it. So, that sort of rough 3% sort of ratio. How does that compare to the normal cold? A normal flu, like a really bad flu season, kills about 0.1% of people.
Yeah.
So it's roughly, 10 to 30 times more than a normal sort of flu season if you were to get it.
Yeah, that's cool because one of the things with stuff like this is everyone gets their statistics from different sources. And so you get a lot of talking past people where it's like, oh, no, it's 100x. No, it's 10x. No, it's not. It's the same as a normal flu.
Yep.
Good to know. My numbers were relatively similar. I found, I guess, probably it was closer to a 2.5% a fatality rate, and about 10x lethality compared to the common flu.
Yep.
So good to see our numbers were good.
Close, yeah.
So when I actually did mine, so it's just how quickly it's changed since I did my stats. When I did mine, there was around about 50,000 cases, I think. And no, so what was that?
The existing cases?
No, sorry. This was so I looked at particularly, so when I was doing this, I was interested in the, I suppose, differences between the elderly and young, as well as differences among men and women. So men actually get it a little bit more, the fatality, sorry. Men, I found it was saying around 2.8%, and for women it was 1.7%.
All right.
So patriarchy strikes yet again against men.
Yep.
And with no pre-existing conditions, just in general, it had about a 1% fatality. So that's still not nothing.
No, it's still something.
When you're thinking of it, like when I was doing a little bit of research online, people were like, oh, it's okay. Like it's basically the normal flu, but it kills you if you're already sick. Yeah. Which is, I can see that way of thinking as well, but you're only one car crash away from being in the hospital, one heart attack away from being in a very weak condition, and then you're probably not going to be like, oh, it's just the coronavirus. You're going to be like, oh shit. Yep. I hope this doesn't spread.
It doesn't go. Yeah. No. So I've got a couple of things here. I want to get them straight out of the way, which is, look, what's the standard recommendations around the coronavirus? And you can look up WHO, the World Health Organization, information around this. Essentially, their suggestion is how you would normally do with the flu, right? Just stop the spread of infection, regular hand washing, covering your mouth and nose when coughing and sneezing, thoroughly cooking your meats and eggs, and avoiding close contact to someone that you believe has got coronavirus, or in a big group that potentially coronavirus is going to be available. So really general stuff. When we're talking about stats, if people haven't looked into it, and potentially we can link to it in a couple of other places, Johns Hopkins University has a ArcGIS, if you're so technically minded to understand what that is, has a dashboard that showcases where everywhere in the world where the coronavirus exists, how many people have recovered, the deaths that have occurred, the rate at which it's increasing, and you can actually look at that real time. So they absorb like a lot of different places where all the data sits and bring it all into one location. So that's kind of, for me, the source of truth in terms of data of what's happening. Yeah. Really, really cool. So we'll post it with this, because I think it'll be, the image that we post with it with a couple of places, just so people are aware of it, so they can see it. Cool. And then the other stuff that I wanted to talk about was, I guess, a comparison to what have actually been pandemics in the past. So just give it a comparison and where we could get to. Yep. And I've got a couple of ideas, because it's something I've done quite a lot of research around this, around where they expect it to be the highest stage, and some of the crazy stuff that we're seeing here in Australia. Yeah. So I don't know if you've got other things as well.
I'll just get on that last little bit of the stats of it.
Yep.
So it's mainly affecting the people, elderly people. So if you're plus 50 as an age group, so if you're over 50 years old, there was about 24,000 cases of it when I did my stats, and about 50% of them were, that was 50% of all the cases in total. And so that means, I guess, like, you know, the elderly were contracting it a lot more easily because their immune system was kind of fucked up already.
Yep.
And it was, you know, just getting them. The deaths from them was about 1K. So that was I think it was close to like 5 to 10% of them dying who actually caught that. So that's where it's like real numbers going like, oh shit, like if I'm over 50 years old, I got a 10% chance of
death if I catch this. Yeah, okay. Interesting. Yeah.
And they also constituted the large portion of deaths.
Yep.
Because there's more of them. So basically this is like a thing that's coming through, and it's just wiping out people who have already got bad immune systems. They're weak because of cancer, because of
other things,
whatever.
immune systems down. Yep.
So no, but yeah, go on to your...
Well, okay, so I wanted to jump into this. So first of all, question.
Yep.
How worried are you about potentially an impending pandemic of the coronavirus?
Yeah, see, I mean, it gets more, but I've also noticed, like, I get more worried the more I look at the news. So the more research I was doing on this, I was like, oh, okay, this could be, this could be really bad. And it is affecting things in my normal day life. So it's definitely good to take notice of that and not be just oblivious. So for those who are outside of Australia and are looking in, we have this fascination with toilet paper.
I don't know what's going on with this toilet paper. And it only impacted me the other day, actually. We went to go buy toilet paper and there was no toilet paper. And I was like, what is Australia doing? If you're listening and you're one of those people who are fighting for toilet paper, please have some common sense. Like, there is so much toilet paper. I don't know why that's the thing that's being, absorbed and taken on board.
And it's just such a weird thing to go for. It's not an absolute necessity. So it's not, if you went without water for a week, you're gonna have some real problems. If you went without food for a long time, you're gonna have some problems as well.
Yeah.
But toilet paper, like, you could just use a rag if you needed to.
Oh, mate, exactly. Indians use rags. Like, seriously, I don't know. Yeah.
All the Asians, so with their bidets and their very technologically superior toilets, just looking at us going like,
what is going on? Yeah. Well, bidets.
I think it's bidet.
Bidets. Anyways, they've increased 500% of sales in Australia. Something like that. Yeah, it's just ridiculous.
Excellent. The other thing I noticed was obviously the stock market crash. So I had some money in stocks.
Yep.
That dropped a lot. So it's, I need to take care of that.
Yep.
As a whole, though, I'm pretty lucky and my family's pretty lucky that we're not super old. We don't have anyone who's in a critical condition in a health-wise sense. So, personally for me, it's not too bad a thing and it's probably not going to affect me real badly. That being said, I did catch the flu a couple of years ago and it knocked me around for a good week and a bit. So I don't want to experience that again. So, if it requires some sacrifices on my part and the government's part and people's part in general to stop it becoming a pandemic, I think that's a worthy cause.
Interesting. I guess for me, the way that it directly might have affected me, so myself and a friend, we're going to go to Japan in 3 weeks and we've actually made the call to not go. So that's a little bit of like, I wouldn't have thought that I would have made a call like that in the past to do with something like a flu or whatever.
Yeah.
And this is probably the first time that I've really thought, okay, this might be something that's worth really considering and do I want to travel during this time? So we've pulled that back, which is interesting for us to pull back. Who knows if that's going to become even worse as they come. So, but two things I wanted to point out. So one, share market. So if anyone's listening to this and might get a little bit, too share markety, that's fine, skip through it. But essentially, if you play in the share market, you might be aware it has been frothy for a long, long time. So for the term, it's been a bull market for like a ton load of time.
Yeah.
With this pandemic and, might be an incoming pandemic, Australia is mostly driven by what happens in a lot of other markets, both the China market and the US market.
Yep.
People might have seen that the Dow sort of essentially fell out for quite a long time over the last 2 weeks. Australia fell suit. And I think what we're finding is a lot of course correction for a lot of those companies, right? So if you look into the financial sector, a lot of the travels sort of companies as well, all of them sort of dropped down. But then that kind of got me looking into a little bit more of the stats and I guess research into, coronavirus. And the reason I rub this out is because I'm going to put something up on the board and I'll explain it for people listening on the podcast, but look at it on YouTube if you want to see what I'm talking about. I looked at, where are we now on the scale of this coronavirus? Where could it be? So that I would have an idea, well, personally from a share market perspective, but how is it going to impact everyone sort of in a human population?
Yeah.
One of the things I found, and this is for Australia, but it's in general across the world, right? So they sort of did a bit of a diagram on the impact and the time that it would actually go through. And one of the things that they suggested was where we are right now, it's March. There was a bit of a research done around, currently in the way that it's spreading, and if it's spreading based on this community sort of spread that it can go quite quickly, what might that look like? If it goes untreated, they actually suggest that it's going to hit quite quickly and then dissipate quite quickly as well. So like any flu, it actually goes through its flu season. So a flu will hit quite harder in the winter period.
Yeah.
Than in the summer period. Why? It's just because it doesn't... normal viruses don't really live in warmer weather. And that's where you have flu seasons. We have this discussion in the past around, cold doesn't create the flu.
Yes, yeah.
But it does give a proposition to be an environment that, encourages the flu to occur.
Yeah.
So they suggested that if left untreated, it's going to hit quite hard in like sort of the July period. This is for Australia, could be for the rest of the world as well, essentially just where it falls in terms of the weather. But what they suggested, if the Australian, as a whole, as the Commonwealth actually does something about it, it'll actually impact less to the Australian population, but just over a longer term. So that sort of interested me, both in how people will react to it, both from a share market, both from individuals, because if we don't do anything about it and we leave it, we're probably going to find a lot of deaths and a lot of impacts, and then it'll go away quite quickly.
Okay.
But if we actually try to maintain it, there's going to be a lot of people that will still have it, and it'll just be drawn out for a longer time and still exist for quite a while, but it won't be as impactful. So I think while obviously the second version where it's a longer sort of tail and it'll stick around more, it'll infect less people and be less vicious, I guess, as a pandemic, if you want to call it. There's going to be a lot of fear for a long time because people will still think that all the way down here, there's still a coronavirus, there's still things that could kill you, which indeed it could. It's just contained as a whole of Australia better and potentially the world. So one of the points that they made is if they leave it untreated, it's going to get hectic quite quickly. And say if the population, like across the world, if it can't be contained for whatever reason, then there's going to be a really strong point of it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. And, at the moment, the way that it's being spread, there's indications that across, a lot of the Western countries and a couple of different countries, it's starting to increase quite quickly. So we could see this spike up in the next month or two. So I think to me, it's what it seems like is if people are thinking that this is, newsworthy right now, I think it's going to get really newsworthy really soon when it starts impacting a lot of other places. But either way, I think people should be expecting that. It looks to me like it's going to be about a year's worth of quite high in the media of what's happening with the coronavirus, being both probably afraid and reacting to a lot of things. And it's not something that's going to go away next week or the week after. Because I think one example is in the US. So there's now been a couple of deaths across the US.
Yeah.
And now a couple of the states are starting to put out quite stringent things, which are, you wouldn't expect for, just a couple of things to be happening. But California is now in an emergency state. There's a couple of other sort of counties that are stopping people from traveling in between the two of them because of something happening.
Yeah.
So there's quite wild things being put in place. And there's only, a few individuals who are getting picked up as having the coronavirus.
Yeah, yeah.
Having a bit of a read around it as well, they sort of indicate that, so within the Australian market, there might already be 2,500 to 3,000 people with the coronavirus sort of incubating. And similarly, they sort of estimate that's going to be in ratios across the world in a similar sense.
Yeah.
Because you can't, the way that it's spreading, it's not a maintainable thing.
What do you think of, I guess, so another aspect to this is with the statistics and stuff like that is you can get drawn down into the conspiracy theory path quite easily.
Yep.
You can go all the way to, I suppose, full retard, which is where I've seen people comparing it. It's actually coming from the 5G network. That's how it's
I did
created.
read that, yeah.
Down to the level of being like, okay, how many people actually have it? Because if you're a young, healthy person, it maybe just feels like a normal flu to you. So, is it that big of a deal? And that's where it's like, okay, I'll sort of step out of the ring with this sort of stuff and not get too drawn into it. But what do you think of, I suppose, the fact, like, potential fact that the numbers are super skewed one way or the other, and it's like,
well,
okay, maybe there are way more cases and it's not being shown, or
here's
being
a couple
hyped up, and there's so much more happening, but the government's clamping it down and they don't want to show it, blah blah blah. That sort of thing.
Here's two sides of the story, and I'll start with the bad side. I personally know people who have a lot of family through China, who are Chinese themselves. If you look at the media in China, you are not allowed to post anything that's negative towards the coronavirus. Just an idea. So when you post things there,
so
it's very
like
regulated, right?
You and a coronavirus. And
so in China, you can only post, and they only allow you to post things like 300 people have been cured. 400 people have been cured. You're not allowed to post things that are negative.
Yeah.
Talking to a friend who knows a little bit about it, from a Chinese perspective, one of the things that he was noting to me was, okay, the amount of people that have been confirmed to have the coronavirus is said to be about 80,000 people in China, right? That's a rough number, with, I think, something like 4,000 deaths.
Yeah.
But two things. One, a lot of the people in China who have been confirmed with the case at the moment, or who have it, there's a fairly rudimentary test, I believe, still that's being used, which has, let's just say in the order of 50 to 60% accuracy if it's right.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things he was suggesting to me was there's actually a lot more people dying in China around a couple of other things, but they are being assessed as, well, they died because they're old or from other reasons, because they can't confirm that it's a coronavirus.
Yeah.
So the mortality rate might be higher than what it actually is. So the numbers could actually be a lot higher than what we are seeing, which is a little bit scary, I guess, if you listen to it. But the other point, I think, is humans, are all mere mortals, and I think we forget things really quickly. And that's why I went through and found actual pandemics, in the past to try to compare it to. And, there's a lot of people in the world, and we start seeing numbers. So it's like 100,000 people, 3,000 people have been dying. We talk in Australia, I think it's been 3 people have died. In the US, something like 16 people have died. When you think of those numbers, you're like, okay, all right, this is impacting the world entirely, and we should really be scared. But then when you look at it, actual pandemics, like, we're still not even close to what it really could be and how dangerous it could be.
Yeah.
So one of the things, I'll list out a couple of them, right? So one, there was a flu pandemic in 1968, just influenza, right? It's just a category 2 flu pandemic.
See, I've never even heard of this one.
Right, 1968, it's called the Hong Kong flu. It took 1 million people. This is 1968. It was just a flu pandemic that was a little bit harder than a normal. It was called the H3N2 strain of the influenza A virus. So from the first day it was reported on July 13, 1968 in Hong Kong. It took only 17 days before it sort of outbreaked across Singapore, Vietnam, and a couple of other countries. It was restrained predominantly there, but it also got to Australia, Europe, and the United States. It had about a mortality rate of 0.5%, but it resulted in death of about 1 million people, including 500,000 Hong Kong individuals, which I think at the time was 15% of the population of Hong Kong.
Yeah.
So, that's 1968, that's 60 years ago. Individuals probably now not aware of something like that.
Yeah.
But just the influenza can have a bad year and kill a lot more people. Going through back on, how it affected the share market in a couple of places, it didn't really, right? It wasn't even a big blip. As you say, probably a lot of the media nowadays is making it seem a lot more than it is. And even if it was to those levels, it isn't like the worst pandemic we've ever seen. So that's one of the things I was like, okay, that's the 1968 pandemic. Cool. What else is there? Well, 10 years before that, there was the Asian flu. So that one doubled. Again, same thing, influenza. It was called the H2N2 subtype. So again, they got rid of that, and that's where that new H3N2 came. That one killed 2 million people, and it was around 70,000 in the US. So again, when people in the US are getting a little bit like, oh man, the share market's dropping, and there's 14 people died, you know, just 70 years ago, 70,000 people died of this particular strain, right? But let's take it back further. Flu pandemic 100 years ago. So now we're talking probably more along the lines of, okay, well, now we didn't have the right health setups and people were dying because genuinely there wasn't ways for you to recover.
Yeah.
But when you start talking about those levels, there was in between 1918 and 1920, the mortality rate was about 10 to 20%, but it was about 25 million deaths. So even if you scale it back to even the mortality rates of now, you're still having about 2.5 million people dying. And then you get all the way to something like the bubonic plague, right? The Black Death in Europe, Africa and Asia, and that killed about 75 to 200 million people. But that was 700 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think, and you know, that was all the way back in the day on how it worked. But even looking at the recent ones and what a real pandemic is, what we have right now would have to multiply by essentially 10, 15 times over to really be in comparison to some proper pandemics that have been noted in the past. So even if the numbers now are maybe a little bit skewed and even just underbalanced, it still doesn't even compare to what was just 60 years ago. So I think there's a lot of push in the media for, obviously it's something that's happening and it's driving a lot of things, but people should put it into perspective on just everything else that's happened in the past and how that affected humanity as a whole.
Yeah. The other thing with that, I suppose, is if you're that worried about it, I suppose it's like, what are you personally planning on doing about it? There's definitely some preppers out there who are, you know, rubbing their hands together because this is what they've been waiting for all their lives.
Oh, exactly. Yep.
But
Doomsday.
If you get into that sort of mentality as well, it's like, okay, is this really a way that you want to live? If you're just now getting concerned about stocking up on extra supplies and food, and maybe that is a good idea just because the supply chains could get a bit disrupted.
Yep.
There's, you know, obviously with toilet paper running out, you could see the same thing happening with canned foods and not even canned foods, but probably more likely going to be the domestic product or whatever, the fresh stuff. That could be a bit harder. So maybe it is a good idea to have a little bit extra food than you normally would, just in case, you know, something happens and you can't get your normal pasta or whatever. But I suppose it's like, as a mentality as well, it sort of drains you. If you continually go around fearing this thing, it doesn't really help, I suppose.
No, it doesn't.
Is my point here. It's just, okay, this is happening. Is it worth fearing? And okay, if it's worth fearing, what actions are you going to put in place? If you can't do anything about it, you know, it's probably best to try and just readjust your mindset to you know, ignore it, I guess. And probably the best way of doing that is avoiding the standard mass media, because like you said, they're playing it up because this is what drives hits and whatnot nowadays. So
yeah, I think I would probably put it more in the sense of just be actively informed about things as opposed to just being wild about anything that's kind of occurring and then in turn, as happening in Australia, take all the toilet paper and take it home. Yeah. I think just being actively informed. So, you know, you're probably not going to at the moment travel to China and go directly to Wuhan and think it's going to be fine. Like, that's obviously probably not a great thing. Yeah. Is it enough to like sort of, you know, stop a trip to Japan and South Korea or something? Well, that's to your decision, right? That's for each individual. To me, that's probably getting to the level that, okay, it's probably not smart to do that because you have to be actively informed about that. But it's also not the levels that it's not a certainty that you're going to get it if you go. Yeah, yeah. Exactly. But in the same sense, it's like people, you know, if your MERS is still kicking around, if you go to Saudi Arabia and you go talk to some camels, like there might be a possibility that you're going to get MERS, right? Yeah. Just be actively aware. You might go and do it, but just be aware that that's a thing that can happen. I think you just got to be keenly aware of what you're getting yourself into. Damn. I think with the whole coronavirus and the whole pandemic, right? I've been seeing in the media now for a couple of weeks, you know, because I've been looking at it really keenly on how it affects stocks in the share market. there's been so much media articles pumped out about, coronavirus, pandemic. It's going to be a pandemic. It's going to be close to a pandemic. By the stats of what that would be, if they're calling it an epidemic in China, which was about 80,000 people, the equivalent of that would be essentially for Australia to have about 40,000 people infected, the US to have about 60,000 people infected, and all the other countries, right, to be as heavily infected in terms of the percentage, in terms of the ratios. That level then would be, let's just give a random number. That would entail, say, 100 countries, averaging out about, let's just say 10,000 of all of them. What does that give as numbers? 10 million people? 10 million?
100 countries at 10,000?
Yeah.
A million.
A million.
Yeah.
A million?
Yeah.
Yes. So a million. So that'd be a million people infected, right? Which is 10 times what the current numbers are.
Yeah.
That's when a pandemic would really entail. But we're already seeing it in the media as, it's about to be a pandemic. Like, that would have to multiply really quickly. And I'm not saying that it won't. Like, we have no idea. It might.
Yeah, exactly.
But until that really hits, you really shouldn't be listening to the media and imagining that it's going to be a pandemic any day now, because there's a long incubation period.
Yeah.
One of the things I was also looking at is just, this is it's both preventable in what you can do and wash up and whatever, but there is a vaccine sort of being developed for it and everything. There is a time frame for that though. So normally that takes about 12 months. Sort of listening to a particular piece about it, takes 12 months generally to make an anti-vaccine or a vaccine, because of you want to make sure that it's done the right way. If you speed it up too much, it can sort of influence it worse. And the last thing we want is for this to become like a proper super bug, and then then we're all like, okay, this is going to go bad.
Yeah.
So they're sort of taking their time. I think in China they're already up to the human sort of tests. Okay. So it might be sort of a thing that's going to be available in 3 to 6 months. And then what generally happens with stuff like this, like the flu, so sort of talking about the pandemics of the flus, and what is it, H3N2 and H2N2, those are still, I believe, flus that still exist, right? They're still around because of the way that they spread.
Yeah.
But that's what a vaccine's for. When you get a flu shot, you get various strands to protect yourself against, like 5 or 6 or whatever. Sort of generally listening to and reading about this sort of stuff, this particular COVID-19, what it'll become is another strain that's going to get added to the vaccine.
Yeah.
And that's something that will still exist in circulation across the world, but it'll obviously be, you can defend against it, and it'll sort of slowly peter away. It might never go away. It might just be something that now exists because it's jumped over. Yeah. So that's generally the cycle of how these coronaviruses in its full extent have existed. Yeah, so unless you can really kill them out at the start, after a while you can't, and that just becomes part of circulation. Which I also thought, okay, well, that would be interesting because, the media at one point is going to just forget about it and let it go to the side. Yeah. And then it's just going to become something in the past. It might still be killing just as many people, but it'll be like, okay, well, it's not the hottest thing right now. We can forget about it.
Yeah. Let's make some predictions. So what do you think will actually happen? And we'll do it to... Okay, well,
the worst and the best, or like
how many cases do you think there will be total?
Yeah.
How many deaths do you think there'll be total? And I guess at its, because obviously there's going to keep going, but when it gets to its peak madness, I suppose.
Well, okay, I'm going to give you 2. I'm going to give you my best case scenario and the worst case scenario. Best case scenario is that
this is disgusting.
The best case scenario is that, especially for the US and a couple of other countries, it is contained enough that the vaccine can come around. It doesn't really matter that it waits until the summer season. The summer season will come to a lot of those countries, and it won't exacerbate the particular virus. It'll just kind of be contained at that point. And I reckon globally it'll probably hit 200,000 people. Yeah. And again, with the same death percentage of 3%. So there'll still be 60,000 people that would have died from it, which is, again, fairly tragic. Yeah. But that'll be I reckon, best case scenario. And then it'll just be contained, and then everything will go through. And I think if that happens, it'll be like 2-3 months of this, and then it'll slowly peter out as everyone goes into essentially winter periods. Yeah. Worst case scenario, and both I was doing a bit of reading into, is worst case was somewhere like a big country go through, it sticks and remains until the summer season. So how, and people wouldn't really know this because a long time ago, the Spanish flu that killed a lot of people, what happened there was it originally started up, I think it was the spring, but essentially the year that it started, it killed a few people.
Yeah.
But then it kind of lay dormant, and then it was the next year that it killed a lot of people, especially in the US. What happened was they went through sort of a summer, everyone was kind of fine, killed a couple of people, but it was okay. Then it sort of lay dormant, and when the sort of winter season picked up, a lot of people got it and a lot of more people died. It was something like 20 times more people died in the winter a year later.
Yeah.
So I think that's the worst case scenario where it's sort of at a level where it's still sort of constant. I'm going to say gets to 200,000, 300,000, seems dormant, or it seems like it's being controlled and tracking down. But then a really big winter across a couple of locations pumps it up tenfold. So I'm talking 3 to 5 million people being infected. That's probably where I'm saying that the worst case scenario, 3 to 5 million people.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's my prediction. 200,000 at the best, 3 to 5 million at the worst.
Goddamn hedging. I don't like it, but I'll accept
You'll take it. You'll have to take it. Accept it.
I was probably going to say something around the middle. So around probably 600, 700,000. Just something as a guess. Like you mentioned, we're coming into the winter. This is totally uninformed opinion, though. I just want to see. I'm going to put it out there and just see how it goes. But yeah, I'd say probably that much. So because how bad do the winters get in Asia in general?
Not
so like
too,
in China's
well, not particularly too bad.
No. Yeah. Because I guess on the southern hemisphere, Australia, New Zealand, pretty much down the bottom-ish.
Yeah.
So that's where we get the summers and winters, and in the middle it's a bit more monsoonish and
more
year round.
constant.
Yeah. So I'm guessing that. Why not? And peak media, I think, will probably be in 2 or 3 months' time.
I think so. I think, again, this is not hedging. This is my thoughts. I believe that the share market is going to go down quite harshly, especially on the back of what happens in the US. At the moment, there's 14 people that have died in the US, or 16 people. And there's been some fairly big drops. I think that if that was to multiply by a few levels, that is going to drop really quickly, and there's going to put a lot of pressure on a lot of companies, a lot of global businesses. I know that in the Australian market, there's already a stimulus plan being prepared for small businesses and medium enterprises, where essentially the money is just going to be given out to allow the economy to continue. Don't be surprised if that happens across worldwide, right? The cash rate across the US dropped not just 1 basis point, but 2 basis points by 0.5. The Australian cash rate dropped by 0.25. Those sort of things can only go down to a certain extent. The absolute worst state, though, and it isn't the coronavirus that scares me. One of the things I was thinking about was, the coronavirus, it's a big issue. It kills people. Where I could see it starting to get really nasty is, let's imagine at the moment manufacturing, right? A large portion of it is in China.
Yeah.
We're starting to already get to a point where it's a lot of people who are both working through China or getting a lot of parts from China, you don't really want to get them anymore, right? Or we're not giving, say, a lot of A2 milk to China because of issues or whatever it may be. We're stopping flights going to China. We're stopping flights going to South Korea. It sets a level for a lot of damage to be caused politically wise, because I could imagine, this is not out of the question, where like US and China had a lot of issues with trade deals in terms of making sure that everything was going through. If for some reason the US was to say, we're not even trading with China anymore, we're not taking any of their things, it's going to be too much issue from this sort of virus or whatever, I could sort of see China sort of turning against people on that side as well. I know that currently internally in the papers of China, what's doing the rounds as of last week was they're trying to pump a lot of things into the Chinese media, saying that it was the US who started it.
Okay.
And also that, look at how US is starting to get a lot of viruses and people dying. They don't know how to hold an epidemic.
Yeah.
So, because they don't kind of share how much it happened in China as well.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of this could actually start something quite more deadly and globally as an issue between, affected parties. Could it, create almost a war between people because things are not being shared and things are being kept from each other, which then damages smaller countries like Australia, like other islands and the like, because, we get a lot of things, we export a lot of things, but we import a lot of things as well. if a lot of those import sort of networks were to stop, we are at the absolute mercy of what happens from the US and China. And you would see just some like terrible things happen to Australia. One of the things, obviously, economically wise, the Australian dollar is at the moment falling, not massively, but it's falling. You know, would things like this was to escalate economically, you could see things like what happened in Venezuela happen across global locations where the dollar will just mean nothing because we cannot provide or be serviced by any sort of country. So I think that is where it can lead to some real deadly things.
Okay, I very much doubt the Venezuela thing. That was more.
Yeah, well, that was, but that's what I'm thinking. Like extreme level. If you were to ask me extreme, I think that's where it could get like super nasty. I think
that's exaggerating.
All mere mortals, mate. All mere mortals.
No, I do agree with I suppose the fear being the worst part of it, and that taking over. And having actions that don't reflect like the actual reality of I guess like the loss of productivity, for example. So say the getting this virus will affect GDP by 5% or something.
Yeah.
What would scare me more is like the overreaction to it and that causing issues. So for example, I think there was a small business, a airline in the UK that went out of business because they only had so many flights and some of them got cancelled. So that basically put strain on their budget, and they were already at like max point for running a tight ship.
Yeah.
And so they had to go under and that sort of thing. So say that got exaggerated and was with economics, all this stuff is tied into consumer confidence and things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like, goddamn, if you're trusting humans to make smart decisions,
especially ones that are being emotionally charged by things that are coming. So, and that's what I think. What scares me is if we actually get what is a pandemic with the coronavirus. I think that if we are reacting to the coronavirus now like how we are, then it's just going to be like get really, really bad globally. Like it's just if we keep reacting like this to something that's a real pandemic, then things are going to get really nuts. If we're all fighting for toilet paper and there's whatever there is,
three deaths in
Australia. There's 3 deaths and 60 people affected, like I wouldn't want to see what happens when we're 100,000 affected.
Yeah.
Right? Like people are genuinely not going to leave their house.
Yeah.
Like 80% of people are not going to leave their house.
Yeah. Well, I just started reading this book, Never Split the Difference. And it's by an FBI agent, FBI negotiator, who I think he was like the top counter terrorist.
Intelligence.
Yeah. He was basically the dude, like when shit hit the fan,
he was the
really
one.
Badly. He was the one.
Do you know what his name was?
Chris Voss.
Might have listened to a podcast about him.
Yeah, there was one with Sam Harris.
Yeah.
With him. And yeah, even just at the start of this book, I've only just gotten through the intro, but he's really highlighting, okay, he went to Stanford or Harvard and was in one of their negotiating business courses.
Yep.
And you think like, okay, these are like the high-powered attorneys, the people making deals.
Yep.
These are the guys who have like the best info, the best tactics for us. And he was saying like, okay, what he actually noticed was they were being taught all the logical steps and assuming everyone's rational actors, but in the actual negotiations he was doing, it was like, it was all emotional, and he was talking about the Danny Kahneman sort of work, Thinking Fast and Slow, which I still need to read and really want to read, of just how much of the brain is basically every decision sort of starts off in that emotional sense, and then it's only the sort of second sense of slow, logical, rational thinking that kicks in well after. And usually you make your decisions stupidly, as you'd say, and then afterwards you can justify them or whatever.
Yeah, it's a higher percentage that you got to do them emotionally, charge them not.
Yeah, I think. Yep. The only other thing I wanted to talk about was just pandemics in general, and talking about, I suppose, how bad some of this stuff is compared if you compare it to the past.
Yep.
So in Guns, Germs and Steel by Jared Diamond, he has his basic book was, I suppose, on the effect of why some countries are doing better than others. So why is the Western world, America, Australia, Canada, Europe doing better than, say, Africa and parts of Asia and things like that? And he had like all these lists of why, and a lot of it was to do with how crops are grown, how easy it is to domesticate animals. I suppose the transport options, so either going north-south or east-west.
Yep.
If you have countries that are more east-west orientated, it's like way more easier because the climate's the same for stuff to travel in between it
Okay.
versus the other way. And he was also talking about the pandemics that happened when the Native Americans were first meeting with the Europeans and stuff, and they got decimated. So if you want to know a pandemic or an epidemic, that was where 95% of them died from smallpox or measles or whatever it was.
Yeah, okay, that's nuts.
And he was saying, like, why wasn't it the opposite way? And he was saying it was basically because in the European countries, it was people living in dense populations close to animals, so not spread out. It was, these towns and cities, but with the poor hygiene practices that you might find in China, for example, of people, those open markets with the fresh animals are there. Yeah. You watch your bat get cooked and live, and then you eat it or whatnot. And so, it was just interesting knowing more about that, and then the immunity, so where these things actually come from. Yeah. So it's actually, it is the places which are super dense and then have that human-animal interaction. So China, get your shit sorted. Stop putting your pigs into the middle of the city and eating those bats and whatnot, and we'll all be sweet.
That's the solution. That's it. We'll all live happily ever after that.
The immortal solution. Done. Easy.
All right, well, that was coronavirus. There's a couple of stats in there. Again, look, if you want to hear about it, all we're saying is take care, be informed. Don't just listen to the media like it's gospel. Actually, just be aware of it.
So that's one other thing I wanted to say was try a couple of different sources. So I went down into the classic. I've got this one forum now, which has like the ridiculous right-wing people, the conspiracy theories. And I like to check in there every now and then, see what they're up to.
Just to check if you're sane still,
Yeah. And, it's sort of good to go in there and get like a little bit of a refresh of like, okay, these people are saying this stuff and like their thinking is obviously flawed, but some of them are actually sort of smart and have some good arguments. Yeah. So it's good to go there and then check out your own statistics and not just, like rely on one source, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. No, exactly. Good. Okay. All right. Well, that was coronavirus discussion pandemic episode 25.
25.
Now,
Juan, your points.
Did this challenge. Well, look, I essentially I took off from Tuesday to today. So there was no work done in fitness challenge. I've got a goal to get a 2-pointer sometime this month. Yeah. But it didn't happen this week. And that's all right. That's okay. We've got a new week coming. Today's squats, for those at home counting, I've not squatted heavy for a long time, and I had a ridiculous goal for squatting in this particular yearly challenge. Yeah. But I'm now back to the weight that I'm supposed to be doing for reps.
Okay, that's good.
And it might come along. It might actually be possible this year. So
nice.
We'll see. Keep on healthy and see how it goes. But no, for now, I'm stuck at 24, still lower than the episode number and well behind the actual track of what I should be. So we'll get it up there. Disgusting. Now I know Kyrin down here, Mr. Michael, as a mere mortal, has gone up. So I know that at least 32. I know he's in the 30s, but is it actually going to be harder?
One cheated. I wanted to keep this hidden, but he checked out my little scoreboard that I keep written in the office here. I did not do more, but you're lucky. You're very lucky.
Lucky.
So I got 4 points. I did 6 back-to-back press to stands.
Oh, that's brilliant. You should have videoed that. Good. I want to see a video of that for sure. Did you actually get anything? No.
I didn't get that one on video. Man, it busted up my neck. Something awful, because when you do them, all the strain sort of goes onto your neck. And so I did 6 of them. By the end of that, I was like, ooh,
this is a lot.
I really felt it.
Yeah.
Handstands are going really good though. I did another 70-second handstand, so another
70.
So another 5 seconds, I would have got some points. Unfortunately, I did not, but I'm getting very, very, very close to some more points there.
Good.
I'm progressing. Just got to
keep at it. Now, these points are going to go up from now on. I'm telling you right now. Now, let's finish it off. As always, you can always find it on Facebook, the Twitters, YouTubes, Instagram, potentially LinkedIn if we get this sorted.
Yeah, TikTok.
If you see us around with our shirts at events, I would 100% want you to come up.
Yeah.
If not, I'm going to come up to you and say to check out Me Immortals and tell you to listen to episode 25. Go to the end, go to the 53rd minute of this and reply back to this particular comment.
Yeah.
Look, if you're listening still, please subscribe, listen in, share with us, comment back, whatever it may be. We love the interactions. We probably said this a couple episodes ago, but it is going to be scaling. We are going to be changing some things up. The video quality is probably going to improve. The content's going to increase. We're going to be sharing more information. It's just going to be fun. It's going to be good fun.
I'm starting up another channel of my own as well. So this is one of my goals is to get a lot better with my Spanish. So I'm starting up a Spanish channel where it's just going to be me speaking in Spanish of different things.
Yep.
You know, I'm not exactly sure who the target audience is going to be for that.
But let's see.
A lot of it is going to be for me just actually speaking it because that is what I'm really lacking at the moment. I'm doing plenty of reading, plenty of listening, plenty of writing, but I'm not speaking enough of it. Good. So want to do that and, look out for Me Immortal Michael on YouTube and those sort of things.
Soon near you.
Yep.
Very good. Well, that was episode 25. More to come. Now there's 25 weeks in at the very least. And we set ourselves a goal to get
I think we missed a week, so it'd be 26 since we started.
But we did aim for 50 in a year. And I think we're tracking fairly well. So keep in tune. We're going to keep going with these episodes. More content to come. And that is all. Juan out.
Kyrin out.